The West is at risk to succumbing to a cultural revolution very similar to China in the 1950s. And ironically, China actually has the chance to leapfrog the West in terms of technology and science, exactly like the West did during the Cultural Revolution in China. So, in other words, there could be a full blown reversal of history here. I'm going to discuss what I mean with that and why that's really serious. And I think also, hopefully, I can offer some ideas of how to prevent that from happening. This is an All In Wrong podcast. It's May 19, 2026. This is Criminal for the year. We're down 3.5%, markets up 7%, round flowing by 10.5%. So the Cultural Revolution in China in the 1950s was a sharp reversal of progress. It was triggered by Mao and the thugs around him. And as far as I can see, and I'm not super versed with Chinese history, but from what I've read and during my time living in China, I've actually read a lot about this for whatever was available, of course. And I think there was definitely a fear of progress within the Chinese population. The communists had won their civil war. They've succumbed the Chinese. I mean, they've been able to push the Chinese out, of course, with the help of the West, but still. So there was a huge bitterness amongst the populace against the elites, who not just let them down, but also weren't able to fight any kind of foreign intrusion. There was lethargy in the country, and as a result, there was this huge anti-progress movement. Now, of course, it had different names. Let's say in the name of the proletariat, the worker, and the worker was sacred, and everybody else was an aristocrat, a bourgeois. They borrowed some ideas from the Bolshevik Revolution, some ideas from Marx, although not that many. And fundamentally, it was their own kind of revolution. I mean, it was Maoism. It was while the Bolsheviks attacked the aristocrats, they did actually let science and technology flourish. And the scientist and the engineer in Russia, in the Soviet Union, was actually even put on a pedestal. And that's because the Soviet Union was in competition with the United States and became the superpower. China did not go down that path. China did a full-blown reversal. For example, one source is Ai Weiwei's biography, the Chinese artist who now lives in Berlin. And he talks about how his father was an artist and basically an intellectual, and how he was put in a gulag and really treated very badly. And that wasn't because he did any kind of art that was anti-Mao or anything like that. It was just he was learned. He was an educated man, and with him a lot of other educated men, and in particular people, let's say physicists, engineers, mathematicians. All of these types of people were not just killed or put in gulags, but much, much more damaging. It was unbelievably discouraging for the young population of the 1950s and 60s and 70s in China to even attempt to become a learned person. And I think, why am I talking about this? I think here in the West, when I say West, that is Europe and the United States, including the former Commonwealth countries. So I consider that the West, and then I would adjust, attach even countries like maybe Japan, South Korea, and Brazil, and countries like that. Maybe South Korea is an exception here, but mostly what I can see from my vantage point, so the people I know, the people I communicate with, I have family in Switzerland, I have friends in Europe, I have friends in Brazil. There is an anti-progress sentiment. There is fear of losing your job. There is fear of going in with the tech bros of Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of narratives like that. There's an anti-rich person mentality that these days means you're anti-tech because most rich people are in tech, and the others who are able to sort of make a living and also accumulate wealth are basically footnotes compared to the kind of wealth that tech is creating. So in this whole context, I can feel there is an anti-progress movement sort of emerging in the West. It's more pronounced in Europe, in the US. It's pronounced in certain areas, primarily on the East Coast, in the elite universities on the East Coast. I would say it's also very pronounced in the large metropolitan cities of the United States, namely New York, Chicago, and LA, which are run by their own little versions of Bolshevism, Maoism, communism, wokeism, you name the ism you want, but it's all kind of leading towards the same sort of anti-progress, anti-meritocracy and pro-diversity, diversity as being we decide who gets how much of the pie, that kind of diversity, which is really not diversity. It's much more, confiscation, appropriation, stealing. You can use your own word, but this is not about. I'm not talking about the mayor of New York now and my concerns that a city like that can fall to an autocrat like that. My concern is that during my life, ever since I am able to put two and two together and starting to think about what I want to do with my life and being an adult and all of that, I have always been very clear about one thing, which is that the only thing that can save me from despair is knowledge and progress. Both of these things are indispensable. I've also spoken a lot about the point that freedom and knowledge are two sides of the same coin. So I would throw in that freedom, knowledge, progress. Progress as defined as a better future for younger generations than the life that we have as the older generation. That is progress. Better in terms of opportunities and options. That has always been my guiding light. That has been my North Star. That's what I believe in. That's what I feel very strong about. I think I share that with China. I think China has totally turned the corner from the 1950s when there was this anti-progress, fear of progress, fear of technology, disrespect to science and technology to the point where people were put in prison because they knew things and things along those lines. China has totally turned around. I think last time I visited China, there was hope there. There was energy. There's excitement. And I feel exactly the opposite in many parts of the West. Not everywhere. I live in Silicon Valley. I don't think Silicon Valley has that problem, but that's a little enclave compared to most of the US and then also most of Europe. I think the US, it's kind of like you have these epicenters, Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, that are full of hope, full of people with STEM university degrees flocking to these places and trying to build companies. California is certainly a big place for that also, regardless of the political situation here. Whether it's Silicon Valley, even Los Angeles, despite all the destructive politics of Los Angeles, there is a lot of hope there. There are people building technologies. Now, let me just put out one more thing, which I think is important to understand what do I actually mean with technology and what do I mean with progress. In my opinion, the pecking order is very simple. Mathematics serves to describe physics. Physics serves to describe nature in order to generate technologies that help us not getting killed. That's the pecking order. So everything starts with mathematics, the language of God, the language of nature. With that, we can explain physics that is a more abstract, a less abstract and more sort of maybe lower stack level of explaining nature. And then that is being turned into algorithms. That's what we call engineering, whether it's Navier-Stokes equation of fluid mechanics, whether it's how code executes in agentic form, whether it's how unmanned drones can be counterattacked, or whatever it is. Engineering is the key. And then the purpose of everything is really defense. It is not to get killed, literally not to get killed, because a dead person has no time and money and capacity to think about any kind of ethical or moral question whatsoever. So we have to first solve for that, and then of course we can solve for all these other things, the ethical questions, and you know, for all the pacifists out there, I'm all with you. Nobody wants war, but the only way we can prevent war is with technologically advanced deterrence. So having said all of that, I fear that in the West, we have this cultural evolution now that people are going against technology and progress. And we've seen that, for example, ironically, in California, the most educationally advanced state in the world, probably, maybe with the exception of some areas in China and maybe Singapore, where you know, public educators are have called to reduce or even eliminate mathematics in public school curriculums. I mean, that's how far this is going. We have an open opposition against AI data centers by the left in the United States, people like Bernie Sanders and others. And you know, you can laugh at these people. To me, Bernie Sanders is a clown. He's a showman and part of a show very similar to Donald Trump, but of course with a lot more damage to be done. But the reality is still there. You have a fear of progress. That's it. And I wouldn't be shocked if in a few years somebody that, you know, if you, let's say, sit on a dinner table with people and you ask them, okay, what's your kids doing? Oh, my son's studying engineering, and they might frown on you. Oh, one of those. And that's of course destructive for a society, because without engineering, physics, and math, like I just said before, without those fields, there is no progress. Knowledge is about understanding nature. We can use certain tools, like I said, mathematics, physics, engineering, to then use that knowledge to generate products and services that help us first and foremost not to get killed. Now, that can be in a war situation. It can also be to protect ourselves from meteoroids or from cold or hot or, you know, tsunamis or whatever. But I think we as humans, we shouldn't forget, as advanced as our society is right now, that where we come from the East African plains, from a very wild, inhabitable type of place. We turned this place we call Earth and home, into a really beautiful place to live, but we should never forget that this can turn around very quickly. And we've seen how bad things can go just recently with the pandemic, when not just was science and technology totally misused, but politics totally was given up the reins to autocrats and crazy people who just, you know, not just wasted a lot of people's lives and time and hope and all of these things, but also a lot of money. We have now trillions and trillions of dollars of debt on all the big balance sheets of all the big central banks in the West. And that's because we were reckless during the pandemic. So the purpose of this episode is, it's really it's a call to action to stop the cultural revolution in the West. We need to stand up. Anybody who agrees with me that we cannot give up knowledge, we cannot give up technology, stand up, go to your local teacher, local university, local representatives, wherever it is, your local dinner party, your neighbors, and make the case for technology and science and progress. We can also deal with all the other problems, with the ethical problems, with the redistribution problems. We can help the poor. We can do a lot of things. We can have solutions for immigration. But before we all do all these things, we have to make sure we don't get killed. Whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's a meteoroid, it's not even that important what the threat is. The threat is there. The threat is always there. It might not be evenly distributed, but it's always there. And what the Ukrainians are going through right now, we might be also going through as Americans in any time. Who knows? We went through that during the pandemic. We were basically at risk of being taken over by a Bolshevik, crew of thugs, and then we had to endure 4 years of Biden and his administration, which was basically stealing from us left and right, and also misusing our Constitution and our Congress. And now with Trump, we have a similar situation on the other side. It's not as bad, but still, it's not good either. So our institutions are crumbling. But the one thing that we can protect, with or without Congress, with or without central banking, with or without a White House that's functioning, is knowledge It is the pursuit of excellence. It is, the pursuit of freedom to think and say the truth, pursue the truth, and in the context of doing that, also deliver better technologies, better solutions for problems, and create new problems, and then keep delivering better problems. That is progress. That way we can measure also, or excuse me, we can optimize for growth and progress. I think one of the things that this is a call to just start even measuring progress, because that's not even on our agenda. It's not our agenda here in the US, maybe a little bit with Trump, definitely not under Biden. In Europe, we're talking more about, equality and redistribution, and whether, foreign nationals who are illegally in the country should be called illegals or not. Those are important, topics, but the most important topic by far is to measure progress. And when we start measuring progress, we will also deliver progress. But if we, of course, measure equality or things like that, then that's what we're going to get. And equality is probably one of the best destructors of progress and wealth. So to summarize, this is a call to stand up to the looming cultural evolution of the West, because if we don't do that, the Chinese will take over and they will leapfrog us. Now, maybe that's not such a bad thing. I'm not anti-Chinese, but why should we give up control of our own destiny? Why should we be at the mercy of their leadership and their lifestyle? The same way they were at the mercy of us. During the Opium Wars, the Chinese had no choice but to succumb to the Brits because they were technologically much more advanced. And that was just the beginning. And under Mao, China really had nothing to offer, zero. They were totally at the mercy of the East-West Cold War powers. Now, we didn't really bother too much with them either, but my point here is that you don't want to give up control over your destiny. You don't want to give up also this beautiful idea that started with way back with the Greeks and this whole Western culture of knowledge creation, of logic, of reason, of understanding, of discourse, of rhetoric. All of these things, they're all together. They're all predicated on one big theme, and that is freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of pursuing the truth. Thank you.